FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is August 10th, 2020. Well, where do we start? The imperial presidency has taken a new step. And basically, the question is, can Trump just order the Treasury to give us money? And hey, I'm all in favor of it because who doesn't like free money? Although eventually the free money is not going to be so free, but it sure feels good when you're getting it. What do you think? Can Trump simply issue an executive order and just pay unemployed people an extra $400 a week? Is that legal? Is that constitutional? Does it matter? We'd like to know your thoughts. KL@kerrylutz.com. That's the email address. Well, right now on with us is our good friend, John Rubino, dollarcollapse.com. Make sure you go take a look at the site, sign up for John's free newsletter. John, executive order, Congress can't get their act together to continue the stimulus, particularly the bonus payment, which was $600 per week, making it a very nice, almost a universal income benefit, UBI. Really, when you just get the money because you can't work, and so many of you can't work, a third of the population, we're already at the universal basic income. But Congress couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. So Trump just said, I'll do it. And now Pelosi and Schumer have to go to court to stop him from giving out money. I mean, this isn't your father's Democratic Party, John, is it?
Hey, Kerry. Well, Trump is so good at trolling the Democrats. I'm not sure if that was his motivation, but it worked out that way because, he just said, all right, I'm just going to, I'm going to sign this executive order and send you guys a bunch of money, which is totally unconstitutional.
Totally.
You can't do that.
It's totally unconstitutional. This is in the Constitution that Congress, particularly the House, all allocation bills have to originate in the House, and you can't. So much of what's going on is completely unconstitutional in this country now. I'd like you to point out stuff that is constitutional that's happening.
Well, yeah, in that sense, he's being consistent with past practices because, everything we do now is either banned or not mentioned by the Constitution, so we just do it. But as you said, now, because Trump did that, now he put the Democrats in the position of either, letting it happen and giving up the prerogative of controlling spending, or going to court to fight it and opposing the coronavirus relief bill that everybody in the country feels like they need right now. And, most people actually do need some kind of help some way. So it's a no-win political position for these guys. And, if you're the president, it's fun to do that to the opposition once in a while, right? To put them in a place where no matter what they do, somebody's mad at them. And that's the way this worked out. I don't know if Trump was thinking this through all the way, but that is the way it worked out. So it's to his benefit. So, a lot of this stuff has gone so far and gotten so crazy that it's actually working to Trump's benefit, even though he's the president who should normally, historically, be blamed for all the bad things that are happening, because that's just how it works. But so much of it seems to be under the control of the Democrats, and so much of it isn't working that Trump is starting to look like the only thing standing in the way of a lot of this crazy stuff, coming to your town. So it seems to be helping him, I think, politically, and that makes the election that much closer, and the probable result of the election that much harder to call ahead of time, and that much more contentious when the time comes. So what a world.
Yeah, who would have thought just a few months ago that something like this could really happen, and yet here we are. So you just look at it and you say, this is crazy. Trump is the great conservative, and here he is giving away money. And the liberals in Congress, Democrats, want to stop him from giving away money. And, they wanted to totally redo everything, mail-in balloting, all that stuff. That's further down on our list. So, hey, we look, Seattle had a pro-cop rally. Who would have thunk? And thousands of people turned out for it. I think way more than the number of people who've been rioting. You think this is the beginning of a movement?
Well, I think this is kind of how civil wars get started. You have one side in the street causing a lot of trouble, and the other side finally gets frustrated enough to go out there and oppose what they see as just craziness happening in the streets because the government isn't stopping it. So hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully we don't end up with two groups shooting at each other out there, but they're letting it happen. These city governments are allowing this stuff to just get more and more extreme, more and more out of control, and it's pulling new groups of people into the streets now. So this is, again, and I've repeated this a lot, so I won't spend much time on it. But we're tribal now. It's very easy to dehumanize the people who disagree with our tribe's positions, and therefore whatever happens to those other people is okay because they're subhuman. And we've really got to take a step back and take a deep breath and realize that, we're all American citizens. The people on the streets are friends and cousins and brothers and sisters, and in some cases, parents. And they, a lot of cases, they live down the street from each other. And this is the kind of thing that in good times wouldn't divide us to this point. But just as Trump is not the problem for the left, but a symptom of the problem, these riots aren't the problem for conservatives. There's a symptom of basically the same problem, that we're being drained dry by an aristocracy, and everybody is frustrated and angry because they don't have upward mobility anymore. So, we're all filtering that problem through our own lenses. Some people see it from a left-wing lens. Some people see it from a right-wing lens. And that makes it seem like, we have enemies at the street level, but the fact is the real enemy is the aristocracy that's sitting up there laughing at these protests. The worse things get here, the easier it is for the oligarchy, for the 1%, to declare martial law at some point. And then we lose all our constitutional freedom, and they're free to keep on draining the peasants forever. And I hate that. That is possibly the end point of this process, but it may well be, and their biggest fear, of course, is that everybody who's in the street right now realizes that they have a common enemy, and then all the peasants grab their pitchforks and go to the castle, and that would be a better outcome than different groups of people fighting each other in the streets while these flaccid city governments just stand by and let it happen.
Oh, they're not standing by. They're encouraging it. Ted Wheeler wants it to happen. He was out there demonstrating with them, and then he got gassed and they cursed him out. This thing has gotten out of hand. The left started it. They wanted it. And now they can't put the genie back in the bottle, toothpaste back in the tube. And it's only going to inure to Donald Trump's benefit in the re-election campaign, because the majority of people, regardless what side of the political divide you might be on, don't want anarchy. You don't want riots. You don't want mass looting like what's taking place in Chicago. And it could all be stopped very simply, very easily, just with a proper deployment of force. Yes, it's going to take force to do it. Mass arrests. We know how to do this stuff. There is literally hundreds of years of crowd control, riot control, theory, doctrine, ways to handle riots. Rudy Giuliani in New York never had a major riot because New York had several hundred mounted police. Those are the best police to take on a riot and to disperse crowds. And he empowered his police department rather than neutering them. And all of this is deliberate by the likes of Comrade de Blasio, Ted Wheeler, the one in Seattle, what's her name, Jenny Durkin, and Lori Lightfoot. I mean, you seldom ever encounter or more incompetent people But I question whether it's pure incompetence or it's furthering an ideological agenda. Hey, the same with the one in Washington, D.C. Muriel Bowser, complete incompetent, wants riots, which thinks it's going to hurt Trump's chances to get elected. That's what this is all about. It's all about the election. And it's going to probably have the opposite effect, John.
Yeah, I think at this point it's gone so far that Trump looks like the guy who's the voice of reason in all of this right now. But I just don't feel comfortable demonizing either side in this, because that's what the 1% really want. They want the peasants to hate each other. And
well, it's working.
It is working, and it's distracting us from the fact that, okay, look at what happened now with the Fed just this last week, where they said from now on, they're going to go for higher rates of inflation than that old 2% target.
Yeah.
And, that just kind of slid under the radar in all this other craziness that's going on. And what does that do? If we generate 3 or 4% inflation while we hold interest rates at 1 or 2% or less in the US, who does that enrich? That enriches the 1%.
Yeah, the banksters.
Yes, yeah, because that'll force up financial asset prices, which they own, and it'll make saving less and less attractive and doable for regular people. So if you're a retiree trying to get by on your savings, and inflation is 3% and your bank CD pays you 0.5%, you are losing ground year after year after year. Where's that money going? It's going to the 1%. So that, to me, is a way bigger deal than protests. Oh. And not that if you're living in Portland, obviously, these protests that are turning into riots are huge deals and they need to be stopped. And I'm absolutely not arguing that. I'm just saying that to the extent that we focus on it, it's distracting us from the real theft that's happening on a vast scale. And that is the source of all these problems. The reason we have so much basically hatred now in the country is that so many people feel like they're being screwed over. And they're looking at the wrong source of their problem. In other words, they're blaming the wrong people. On the left, they look at people like us, Kerry, and say, oh, look at those capitalist fascists. We should burn down their buildings because everything they got, they stole, And on the right, you look at the protesters and say, these guys are communists. They're going to try to set up a new Soviet Union here. So let's just go ahead and shoot them because see, that's what the 1% wants, and that's where we are now. So it's frustrating that it feels to me like a lot of people are falling for the con, or at least not focusing on the real enemy. And these guys are getting away with it. If we generate 4% inflation, that's basically the end of the middle class in the US. Not that there is much of a middle class left, but that would be the end of it, because it would be impossible to save money safely. And that's the engine of upward mobility. When you put some money away and then, you do something productive with it and it grows, that's how you get from working class to middle class. And if we can't do that, it's over. And then if we think it's bad now, it's going to be so much worse a few years from now if we have negative interest rates and 4% inflation. I mean, I can't imagine us getting there without the system just completely spinning out of control, which I guess is, the dollar collapse thesis. That's the whole, the sound money trajectory that we've been saying for so many years now, where we get to the point where we have no choice but to raise inflation and to bail everybody inside out and to push interest rates to negative levels. And then that's when the system spins out of control. That's when the currencies start to collapse, and that's when everybody just bails on the dollar. And we're doing that, and we're heading for that. And we can make a lot of money by owning gold if that happens. But for millions and millions of people, it'll just be a nightmare. And they will act out on the anger that they feel, and I'm worried that it'll be misplaced. They'll direct their rage in the wrong directions, and we'll get some kind of civil war, because we're not that far from that now. When you have groups of armed people in the streets on either side, and governments that don't know what to do about it. That's Europe in the early 1930s. When
they know what to do about it. They don't want to do anything about it. And I would just add that we're not talking about protesters here. We're talking about rioters, looters, attacking police, attacking government buildings, all this. So the disorder has to be put down. That's where it has to begin. And from there, you could try to rebuild. Well, anyways, hey, we're looking at the other chaos coming in November. 1/5 of all mail-in ballots disqualified in the New York City primary. And the other thing that's happened, which has gotten no coverage whatsoever, is the fact that the post office lost $2.2 billion, I think, in the last quarter because of COVID. And the Congress and president can't agree on a bailout. And the Democrats are hoping to basically steal the election through mail-in voting. Well, we see it's not working now. Can you imagine the curtailed hours that many of the ballots will never even make it to the polling places to be counted until after the election? So they've said to Trump, oh, we'll just do mail-in balloting and we'll just get the election that way. And Trump has said, hey, I control the post office. And the Postmaster General said he's cutting back hours, deliveries, and everything else. So that's not going to be real viable, the mail-in balloting, for also the fact that they're so incompetent that they can't handle the ballots anyway. It's hard enough handling the absentee ballots, but the idea of everybody in an election mailing in their ballots is just going to be chaos.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Trilogy Metals is a world-class developer in Alaska's Ambler mining district. The company already possesses 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, over 1 million gold-equivalent ounces, and now over 77 million pounds of cobalt. Trilogy's Arctic project boasts an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion with a 33% IRR. Trilogy is led by an experienced management team with proven success in discovering and developing projects in Alaska. The company is well capitalized, has no debt, and possesses strong institutional support. Trilogy trades on the New York and Toronto exchanges under the ticker symbol TMQ. To learn more, go to trilogymetals.com. That's trilogymetals.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, this kind of feels a little bit like the whole Y2K thing back in the day when we saw this thing coming and it was going to be chaos unless we did something to fix it. And back then we fixed it. We reprogrammed all the computers. But it's not clear we have any fix for this now because at least based on public opinion, it will be really hard to do in-person voting. A lot of people will just stay away because they're so afraid of being in crowds and getting sick, which means that that's probably not something we can do without a lot of turmoil also, and a lot of questions about whether the election is legitimate because so many people stayed away. But this mail-in voting thing doesn't work. It doesn't really seem to be doable in a way that everybody trusts, because so many people screw up their ballots, and there's, a lot of integrity. On the left, there seems to be this opinion that, oh, come on, cheating doesn't happen in elections.
Ballot harvesting doesn't happen.
Of course,
mass cheating happened in the last election in California. I mean, they were just they were going to town. They knocked out most of the Republican nominees through ballot harvesting, and to think that nothing happens, well, in New York, with all of this, 1/5 of all mail-in ballots being disqualified, I think maybe there's an argument there, John.
Oh, can you imagine if that happens nationwide and lawyers have to go over every single ballot, and then they have to argue about whether, this disqualifies it or that disqualifies it and should be counted. And there are close precincts where, it's a few hundred votes or just a couple thousand votes that separate winner from, it's just going to be crazy. And, if we still got street protests at the time and we've still got a pandemic where half the states are kind of sort of locked down. Yeah, it's just, see that is what we're sketching out is kind of the worst case scenario, but it's getting closer and closer to the, to the main. Yeah. It's becoming plausible. Like you said,
Likely.
more than just a possibility. Now it's inching towards a probability, and it's right there at the end of the year. It's just a few months away.
Yeah, and Trump gave a very peculiar speech over the weekend. He was at a Whirlpool factory, maybe it was on Friday, and as he was giving the speech, he was standing in front of washing machines. There's just like major money laundering busts, so it makes you wonder, sending out a code there or something. A Ukrainian bust in Cleveland and Miami. We all know about how corruption permeates the Ukraine. And then he's made the statement, you're not going to see me around for a while. There's a lot of very wealthy people who I've upset, and basically sounded like he's going to be in a bunker someplace. And if you want to figure out where Trump is going to be, look for the world's biggest, best fortified bunker, because I think that's where he's going to be heading to. The other thing is, when he left the White House the other day on Marine One, he had a whole receiving line of all of the White House employees, basically giving them a bon voyage, meaning that they know he's not coming back there too soon. Then you've got on September 17th, they're going to be Occupy the White House. So we're going to have massive civil unrest around the White House. And obviously the DC mayor, she isn't going to do anything about it except paint Black Lives Matters murals around the White House area. She's not going to do anything. And this is shaping up, John, to something's going on big. I think gold and silver have been sending us a message that really can't be ignored. Something's happening. But on that note, so did we have our gold silver correction Friday and today? And what's doing with miner earnings for Q2?
Yeah, gold was due for a correction. So was silver, because they had huge runs. I mean, silver went from $12 an ounce to almost 30. And it's up again today. So if the correction that we had, that little brief drop in price last week, if that was it, then it's off to the races. But who knows? When things really get going, you can't really predict when the correction is going to come. There are always corrections in bull markets, but bull markets tend to do really extreme things. And this is one of those times. And the real action, I mean, gold and silver are up, and that's good, but the real action is in the mining stock earnings reports right now, because a lot of them, if you're a gold miner, for instance, you're getting $500 more an ounce than you got at this time last year. And that means your margins just explode. So they're reporting killer earnings. Like Barrick just had they reported $500 million of free cash flow in one quarter. So that's big tech stock kind of numbers there. And so what that does is two things. First of all, it makes the stocks themselves look a lot more attractive, because all of a sudden they're reporting spectacular year-over-year comparisons, which everybody loves, right? That's the thing you want if you're a stock market investor. So you got that kind of momentum. And at the same time, you've got a lot of free cash flowing into these big miners who have to decide what to do about it or with it. And the speculation is that they're going to buy up all the little guys, because they aren't replacing their own reserves through their own exploration projects. So they need to get more reserves from somewhere, and they've got a lot of new cash flowing in. So it's reasonable to think that they're going to start buying up the best juniors, which means we're going to see this wave of takeovers at the same time that the juniors are getting more valuable because the gold in the ground is getting more valuable. So there's a decent chance that this is a real, like a front page news story at some point, the action in the gold market. And the New York Times is already covering gold regularly now. They just had another article titled, "Why is everybody buying gold?" which was a pretty favorable article. It explained correctly why it's happening. So
remarkable.
Yeah, because normally you think that, especially with a title like that in the New York Times, that it's going to be some kind of hit piece, right? Where they, it's just a rock, it's a doorstop, it's something so primitive. Why do we even consider it as part of the financial system now? But they didn't. They came out and explained, okay, the Fed is creating way too much money and interest rates are really low. The whole correct story. And that's news to a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of New York Times subscribers have never seen that that explanation for why gold is. Yeah.
I don't even know what it is. I think it's something on a pinky ring or something,
And Robinhood investors are now starting to buy the gold ETFs like SLV and GLD. And that's a lot of new money coming into that sector that didn't really have a faucet that you could turn on and send that kind of money that way before. And now all the trading apps are trend following, and gold is in a great trend. So it's attracting a lot of capital from that sector too. So everything seems to be falling into place for a spectacular bull market in the precious metals miners for sure. And the only scary part of this is that they're already way up, so a correction could happen easily here that knocks 30 or 40 or 50% off of a lot of these prices. But that would be a buying opportunity. If that happens, keep powder dry. And if it happens, then step in, because the long-term prognosis for precious metals is great, especially if the stuff we talked about earlier happens. If the Fed decides to go for 4% inflation and pushes interest rates into negative territory in order to get there, gold and silver are off to the races. That is the perfect environment for precious metals. It's a bad environment for everybody else, but It's spectacular for precious metals. And it's official now. I mean, that's what the government is actually going to do. You got you have the president just illegally giving money to everybody in sight, and you got the Fed saying, 2% inflation is too slow. We're going to have to go for a higher number now, one way or another. And that's the kind of stuff that the gold bugs used to say would happen, and everybody was like,
everybody poo-pooed us.
Tinfoil hat. And now it's actually happening. So we don't want to get too used to this new normal, because it is fundamentally not normal. And the further we go into this, the closer we get to the breakdown of the global financial system. And when that happens, you really don't want to be in financial assets like bond funds, because those are the things that'll get crushed. So
they call them bombs. All right. Well, I think we are done for this week. Any of your questions or comments, email KL@kerrylutz.com. Oh, one other thing about Robinhood, they stopped reporting the public data, so it's harder to follow them now. I guess privacy concerns, and they didn't want people taking the opposite side of the trade. They want to reserve that for big players like Citadel, who are paying them for the order flow. They don't want to cut into their customers' turf. They're real customers. Their real customers are not you, Joe Sixpack, who has an account with a few $1,000s worth of stocks in it. The real customers are the people buying the data. Rather, you, the account holder, is the product, and the real customer are the high-frequency fraud traders, and who can basically front-end you and take the opposite side of every trade and then go and trigger them, and there's nothing you can do about it. So anyway, KL@kerrylutz.com. Let us know what your thought on all of this is. And make sure you take a look at John's site, dollarcollapse.com. Sign up for his newsletter. Sign up for ours at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And John, we will pick up where we left off next week.
See you, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.